Hi, I'm Dustin McLaughlin, and I'm the curator at the Hayes Presidential Library Museums. Today we will be talking about the President's Gallery. In this case, there are a number of Lincoln artifacts. One of the most interesting to me is this coat fragment, which is within this glass jar. And this coat fragment is a part of the coat that he was wearing when he was assassinated. And really interesting in the fact that, one, we have it, and two, that it is actually authenticated by the executive clerk and Lincoln's administration. We also have his slippers, which were reportedly worn the morning that he was shot, and was of such note that in the most recent movie about Lincoln with Daniel Day-Lewis, they actually came and took note of these slippers so that they could reproduce them for the movie. We also have a number of pieces of china that belonged in the White House while Lincoln was president. And these pieces of china actually have chips in them and they're cracked. And the reason why they're that way is, well, just from normal wear and tear. But then Hayes decided to save the china and take them himself instead of having them thrown out. So we have some china that belonged to the Lincoln administration as well, and these were also used during Andrew Johnson and Grant's administration. Next to the Lincoln case, we have this desk, which was in the White House, and it was used by Webb Hayes, Rutherford's second son. Webb worked as Rutherford's secretary, and in this picture next to the desk, you can actually see Webb sitting at this desk with all of his work and papers in the slots. This desk is called the Grant desk. The centerpiece of this room is the Resolute desk, and this is a replica of the same desk that's still being used in the White House today. It was originally given to Rutherford B. Hayes, made from the timbers of the HMS Resolute. This ship, the Resolute, was stuck in the ice, and a number of British vessels were together trying to find a passage through the northern part of the Western Hemisphere. And after it was stuck, the other ships wanted to head back, and so they abandoned the Resolute into the ice. And later on, an American whaler got a hold of the ship and brought it back. And as a gesture of goodwill for returning the ship, London eventually made a number of desks out of the wood of that ship. One of the desks was the Resolute desk, which was delivered to the Hayes administration to be in the White House, and it stayed there until today. It was not brought into the Oval Office until the Kennedy administration, and after Kennedy was killed, they put it on display at the JFK Library. And it stayed on display through Johnson's, Nixon's, and Ford's administration. Carter brought it back into the White House, into the Oval Office, and he used it. And every president since him, except for George H.W. Bush, has used this desk as their primary desk in the Oval Office. The Resolute desk looks a little different than it did when Hayes was president. The most dramatic change was the front door. The door was not a part of the original desk, and it was added later by Franklin Roosevelt's administration. Roosevelt had polio, and Roosevelt was in a wheelchair, and he did not want people to notice that. So when he sat at the desk, he wanted to make sure that that door was there and shut. So when people were taking pictures, you would not see the wheelchair underneath the desk. Another change that was made to this desk is that Ronald Reagan had it raised 2 inches because he was bumping his knees on the bottom of the desk. On the back wall, we have a number of letters, and each of these letters have signatures from presidents from Washington all the way through Obama. The early letters are from Hayes's collection, as he would collect these letters, and later on they became letters from his correspondence. The most famous might be from Teddy Roosevelt, who wrote Hayes asking him for a number of books. He also has letters from McKinley, and most ironically perhaps, he has a letter from Chester Arthur as the collector of the New York Custom House, and Hayes would later go on to fire Arthur from that position. After Hayes died, the letters were then collected by his son Webb, who has correspondence from Woodrow Wilson. Webb and Wilson were of different parties, so they did not necessarily get along, but they corresponded. Then the Webb second The admiral started collecting letters starting with Franklin Roosevelt, and then from JFK until Obama, the letters were directed directly to the executive director of the Hayes Library and Museums. On this wall we have a panel with a slider, and as you move the slider you can look up random presidents that are highlighted. When we were putting this together, we were wondering what we could add to this that would make it unique, something that you couldn't just maybe Google on the internet and find answers to. So what we did is we highlighted these presidents and how they connect to Hayes. And as you move this slider around, you may realize that there are some connections. And of course, the presidents that were alive when Hayes was alive, there were some direct connections. Some of the presidents that were around before Hayes came around, there might have been comments that he made about that president in his journal. And then later on, we have comments that Hayes, or we have policies to where these presidents were like Hayes, or how they connected together.